Hey, good morning, beautiful artist. So excited to be here again with all of you. Let me just get my tablet set up so that I can monitor any comments or questions as they come through. And do a quick sound check. If you're already here, go ahead and get a screenshot. Good morning, everybody. Let me get this a little bit lower for you. Good morning, Debbie Nelson. Go ahead and get a screenshot if you think you want to paint from this setup. Later on, I'll leave that on the still life setup while I'm just checking to make sure that everything is working properly here. Okay, video's working. Hello, Mary Brackman. Good morning, Marty. Oops. What I just did. I can monitor it. Okay, sound is working. Sound check, sound check. All right, Kathy Kepler. So happy you're here today. Good morning, Juliana. Thank you. Yes, I'm very excited to work on this painting today. So if you want to paint along or paint to this afterwards, go ahead and take a screenshot for your records, or you can do it later from the recording as well. So we're going to get going. Hello, Barbara. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Everybody is here today. Okay, so before we get started, just a couple of friendly reminders. This is the last week, first of all, for these Facebook Live demonstrations. I'm going to be demonstrating brass in particular, but I'll also talk about the composition and why this composition works. And then tomorrow and the next day, we had a lot of votes came in for sunflowers and roses. So I'm going to go grab some of those hopefully today. Fingers crossed I can find both of those. Surely I can. And so we'll do some sunflowers and roses tomorrow and Thursday. Friday, we will do some kind of paintini. There was a comment and some votes for paintinis. And I'm not quite sure yet what the paintini will be of, but those are those little miniature paintings that I do. So that'll be Friday morning because I'm doing an Oil Painters of America. I'm hosting a lunch and learn with them specifically on still life composition. So if you struggle to set up your still life compositions, if you feel like you want to set up, maybe more complex still lifes or, more elaborate or whatever, and it just winds up looking like a garage sale. Well, come on Friday to OPA, Oil Painters of America Lunch and Learn. I've made several posts about this. I've sent out an email announcement about it. So check for the post if you want to get registered. It is a Zoom link registration, not through me, but through Oil Painters of America. So if you can't find it on my social media page, which you should be able to on any of my social media pages, then go to oilpaintersofamerica.com and just make sure that you get on their newsletter list or look for them talking about the Lunch and Learn series. That's going to be a really good lecture on Friday. And so I plan to do a shorter kind of paintini demonstration Friday morning. This is the final week. And if you want a chance to get in on an opportunity to win this DVD, absolutely free of charge, it's 5 of my painting lessons. This is valued at $75. Then you want to be on my email list. All right, so go to artlifewithkelly.com and sign up for any of my freebies that I have there if you're not already. Art Life School members, of course, you're already on the list. You're automatically included in that, so you don't need to do anything. So you can grab the oil painting for beginners masterclass, which is a $500 value, absolutely for free. You can grab the 5-day still life painting challenge, which is kind of similar subject matter to what I'm painting today. And that is a step-by-step buildable process over the course of 5 days. You can grab that absolutely for free. There's also kind of a step-by-step tutorial and materials list and all of that. You can grab all of that on artlifewithkelly.com. And then that will put you on the list, and you'll also be included in the giveaway for the DVD. All right. Yes, these will be recorded. Art Life School members, these all will be permanently in your Art Life School library under the live longer demonstrations section. And so all of these Facebook Lives I've done this month will be in there for you in case you want to revisit any of them later. For the ones that I'm giving away here this month for free, so you still have time to rewatch any of the replays if you want to paint along. Okay, and if you're not an Art Life School member, you are invited to join us. We would love to have you and see you flourish in your artwork this year. So let's get going here. I'm doing a mini today. Gosh, you know, I have done so many minis. You could almost kind of argue that perhaps I built my whole career, art career in success painting minis. The OPA, Elizabeth, I don't know if they send out a recording for that or not. I doubt it. I think that's kind of you got to be there sort of thing. But I'm not 100% sure. That's not my deal. I'm just preparing the presentation and show up and deliver. But you could definitely go to their website and see if they say anything about that. Have no idea. Okay. Good morning, Sabrina Tyre. Let's see here. Grab a few brushes to get going. And I do want to point out that I could not resist using these two colors today, which I just love. And I don't use them a lot in my lessons because I know that, you know, not everybody can get these colors, and these colors are specific to Sennelier. This is in no way sponsored by Sennelier. I'm not, you know, an affiliate for them or anything, but I do really love both of these colors. This one is Chinese orange. It is a beautiful, beautiful, rich, transparent orange. If you don't have this color and you want to paint along, a good mix would be like an Indian yellow and burnt sienna. You can see how similar it actually is to the burnt sienna here, but it's just a little more orangey. You could even maybe do like cad orange and alizarin crimson and get kind of close, but cad orange is opaque and this is a totally transparent color. Anyways, I really do love this color. I just try not to use it too much on demos because I know not everybody can get it, especially like water mixable artist or acrylic artist. You might not, you know, probably can get that color. The other color by Sennelier is Azure Blue, Azure. And this is such a gorgeous color. It's basically a cyan blue mixed with some phthalo, a little bit of phthalo green. You can always look on the back to see what the actual pigments are and look those pigments up. It tells you the pigment codes if you're wondering. Also, if you're wondering if a paint is transparent or opaque or semi-opaque, look at the back and it will show you a box. If the box is filled in, that means it's opaque, meaning it has full coverage, kind of like our full coverage makeup. And if the box is empty, that is a transparent pigment, meaning it's see-through. It's transparent. Okay, so I am going to be using those two colors. I just couldn't resist those today. Hola, Candy, and good morning, Lorraine. Okay, good morning, Marie Pula. Hello, Maria Donnelly. Oh yes, there is a Trader Joe's here. Thank you, Maria, for that suggestion. I might run over there today. They do have nice flowers and kind of more affordable too sometimes. All right. Good morning, Barbara Schatz and Lynn Gatling and Marion. So good to see everybody. And Hedda, good morning, Hedda. Hedda, I hope you saw my note. Friday, I will be doing one of the paintinis, since that's kind of a loaded day for me with the OPA presentation. Then I'm going to do a paintini on Friday because that'll be kind of short and sweet. All right, I grabbed this background cloth because otherwise this setup would be maybe a little too monochromatic, just with the oranges and the Chinese lanterns. But Monty got some gorgeous new oranges for us yesterday, and they were just so rich and beautiful and shiny that I was like, I have to paint those. And one of the topics that got voted on was brass. So I figured we'd just do like a really simple still life. Again, these are the kind of still lifes that I would say kind of built sort of my artistic career on, was painting very simple classic still lifes like this, and built my skill set working on still lifes like this. So you don't necessarily have to have anything too complicated. And I would say probably in the early days, I would have never done a fabric like this because it just would have been too complicated for me. So just to give you some context, sometimes we think, oh, we should be, able to just paint everything all at once. And I just don't think that that's realistic. You definitely do want to make sure that you push yourself in your learning and that you are trying to stretch yourself, I would say at least 20% of the time. If you're always constantly stretching maybe too far from where your skill set is, the opposite can happen where you get really discouraged and kind of down on yourself. And then some people take a really long time to boost themselves back up. Anybody relate to that? So you do want to, I have a phrase where I say you do want to kind of stay in your lane and make sure that you're managing your artistic growth realistically. Okay, so, and just pay attention to how how long it takes you to pick yourself up and, dust off your wounded, scraped knees after a failure, or a painting that did not live up to your expectations is really all it is. But just pay attention to how long it takes you to recover, because the longer it takes you to recover, the longer it will take you to get better as an artist. And a lot of that is just, surrounding yourself with other artists, with other examples, with good teachers and mentors that are going to, let you know, like, hey, it's normal for you to be where you're at in your development. And then a lot of it is managing your emotions and your self-talk as you're growing as an artist, your inner dialogue. Same thing with paintings sales, or if you start wanting to enter shows and whatnot, you just have to keep an eye on how long does it take you to recover after a perceived rejection or failure in those arenas, because the longer it takes you, and sometimes people don't recover at all, and they just give up. It's like they just end up giving up. So just pay attention to that. All right, I'm just toned this with some burnt umber. I chose burnt umber today because this is overall, very rich and warm. Going to be a very rich and warm painting. The blue in the background, blue and blue greens, are going to add a much needed respite from all of that hotness and all of that warmth. And hopefully by me cloth for you today, hopefully it'll help you be able to paint something like that faster. And I really try, that's really my goal, is to try to get you to success quicker than, maybe even I was able to, um, just in terms of, the quality of the education. Okay, an explanation of things. All right, so you can start off with the line drawing if you want to. My preference is just to stay loose and make brush strokes right away. You can start off with just large, simple shapes like a circle or, a rectangle. So whatever works for you, whatever seems to make the most sense. And I would say if you have a goal of loosening up and being more painterly, then this is a better way to approach your drawing, right? Which isn't really drawing, it's just kind of, masses and massing in. But if you have a goal of loosening up and maybe you feel like you're too tight, this is the main thing I would recommend, is not starting with a tight drawing, because however you start is how you will end. And paintings naturally have a tendency to get tighter the more you work on them. So all of this will tighten up with more working. And so that's kind of sometimes how people feel like their paintings look overworked. Well, you've just overworked it. You've made too many changes. You've worked on it too much. Sometimes it's better just to go, this is what it is. I'm going to take the learning from it and I'm going to move on to the next painting, rather than to try to perfect like one painting and keep working it to death. Okay, so in this first stage, in stage one, I break paintings into 3 stages, keep it simple, beginning, middle, end, right? Just like act 1, act 2, act 3 of a play. And so the first stage is we're getting our proportions, our size and placement. I'm just getting like the gesture here of the Chinese lanterns. These are fake Chinese lanterns, which I do have to say, it's the one thing that I actually do prefer to paint fake, is Chinese lanterns. I think I got mine at Hobby Lobby. You can check places like Michael's, or craft stores tend to have things like that. Okay, so also in this stage is setting up your shadow shapes. This is very, very important that your shadow shapes describe your form, and also the ratio of your shadow shapes. A good ratio is, I would say a third in shadow, either a quarter or a third. You want more of the form in light, generally speaking. But you don't want to have half and half. That would be the main thing to avoid, I would say. And one of the ways that you can ensure that you get a good ratio of shadow shapes, it's very intentional, it's not accidental, is to make sure that you're painting by one dominant light source. So I have a spotlight. And again, if you grab any of those freebies I mentioned, you'll also get the supply list, especially with the oil painting for beginners masterclass. And so if you're wondering like, well, what kind of spotlight do you use? Well, go grab that free masterclass and you'll get the supply list. Okay, but and then you want to angle it. You can light it from the right, you can light it from the left, you can do a top light is another option. This is the way that I prefer. I know some people who are left-handed have told me that they prefer setting things up kind of reverse of me and lighting reverse of me, which, makes sense. Excuse me. But most importantly, you just want to have one light source. Now for these little Chinese lanterns, I'm not going to do too much detail on drawing them. I'm just trying to get the proportion and size, kind of like as a note in gesture. I would say gesture more importantly, but like where two of these are connected together, kind of mask them in together right away. You don't have to stress over all the little stems and leaves right now. We're just focusing on the big parts, the big pieces. And then as I work the painting, I'll start to get in some of the smaller stuff. And let me block this spammer right quick. Okay. Marianne says, I resemble that remark. Is that the how long it takes you um, to bounce back? You know, like what's your bounce back? If you had to score your bounce back ability on a scale of one to 100 or 1 to 10, what do you think that would be for you? Yeah, this could be interesting. Let's take a poll if you're not painting right now. What would you say your bounce back ability is after a perceived failure or rejection with your art? How quickly do you bounce back? How quickly do you regain your enthusiasm for painting, um, your desire to paint again? How long does that take you? Do you lose days? Do you lose weeks? Do you lose months? You know, how much time does it take you? Do maybe you pick yourself up right back again the next day after kind of lick your wounds and feel crummy? This is just, this stuff matters, you know. My first year of art school, I realized how much time I was losing by, wounding myself with my inner judge, my inner critic that was constantly comparing myself to other people and how good they were doing, which was almost impossible not to do because you were surrounded by other artists making paintings all around you and making drawings. All right, so this is a good enough start to get going, and I'm going to get in some background color, at least the start of the background color. I'm going to start with that Azure blue. If you don't have that, you can definitely use like some phthalo. I'm going to add some white into that. Added a little bit of yellow ochre as well. And then this is a pretty bold color, so if you want to tone it down at all, maybe grab a little bit of like a burnt sienna or a burnt umber to mute the saturation level. I tend to be in favor of, choosing, making sure that my star of the show color, which is orange in this painting, is more saturated. But, that's just my personal taste and style. So if you really love super bold color, and of course anything right now against this burnt umber is going to look like shockingly intense. And I'm going to add a little more burnt umber just to mute. And my aim is not to like fill in the whole background here right away, but just to kind of get some of that color in, layering some of that in. I'm not afraid to go over some of the stems that I just painted in, or maybe even go over some of the edges. I don't want to have this kind of cut out, pasted on look in my painting personally. So, I just try to make sure not to outline things too sharply or harshly at this stage. I'm going to go a little bit darker with that, with more of the blue and burnt umber, and whatever little amount of white is left in this is just fine. And I'm using my liquid light gel just to get this a little bit thinner on this side, but I do want to utilize some of this shadow that's over here. And you can leave some of that burnt umber showing through. This tapestry kind of upholstery fabric has a lot of texture to it. And so one of the ways I can try to intimate that texture is by, letting some of that underneath show through, kind of creates the illusion of that texture. Then there's some cast shadow back here against the back wall. Keep adding paint to your pile, even in the darks. You want to make sure you're painting with enough paint on your brush. Paint with paint. That's a good idea. Sometimes we forget. Okay, and then like down here, I think for now I'm just going to do some burnt umber for the shadow on the tabletop plane. And you notice hopefully you notice I switch my brush If you didn't, I'll call your attention to it. Switch my brush to a horizontal stroke whenever I go down to the, versus a vertical stroke whenever I go down to the tabletop plane. Okay, awesome. Good. We're getting some, and there's no shame, no judgment here. I mean, that's the main thing is like you have to turn off the judge. You've got to counteract the judge within the judge in your mind. So we're getting some honest answers, which is awesome. Oh, the working it to death remark, Marion says, is the one that resembled her. Yeah. Pam, maybe it could affect the angle, how you put down the brushstrokes. So I would say, since you're left-handed, so I would say focus more on, less on the exact angle. And I'll say this too, um, all of us have different ways that we angle the brush or hold the brush or make brush strokes. I would say that's probably the least important thing to try to copy or emulate. Emulate's a better word than copy, from an art teacher. And also sometimes too, whatever they're painting on. Are they sitting and painting? Are they painting? Like sometimes I have to do strokes a certain way because this is in the way, the bottom of my pochade is in the way. Other artists may not use a setup like this, so they have a different angle of stroke. So anyways, food for thought. Try not to obsess too much over emulating exactly, how someone is making a brush stroke necessarily, like how the angle of their brush is and all that. Marion says couple of days, self-rejections. Yes. Debbie Nelson says weeks. Awesome. That's a really good, honest answer. And, sometimes too, whether it's days or weeks or hours, sometimes too, we maybe even still force ourselves to go to the easel, even though we're still, feeling super crummy from the prior. And that was definitely the case for me in the early days. Just like, well, I got no choice. I got to go to class, and I got to paint because I'm getting a grade. But I don't know how long it would have taken me to do it on my own if I wasn't feeling kind of forced to do that. All right, I'm going to start the brass color. Now with brass, you can really kind of start with burnt umber and any kind of yellow. I'm adding a little bit of that azure blue just for funsies as well, and just to kind of start to kind of tie in some of the blue green. But basically burnt umber, a blue if it needs to be more green, or a black will make it more green. Burnt umber and any kind of yellow. It can be a yellow ochre, which is what I'm starting off with, which is a softer yellow. You can also make a beautiful brass color with ivory black and cad orange. Okay, which is going to be a little bit warmer. And you can also mix up several of these colors, because one thing about brass is that, it's not just one local color. If you paint it too much one local color, it's not really going to look very brassy. So I find mixing up multiple different variations of these kind of dull olivey greens. So let's see, like, for example, burnt umber and say some cad lemon, that gives you a different, can you see that? So this one is more of a grassy green. This one is probably closest to the cad orange, and I am using cad orange today, not cad yellow deep, just so you know. And I'm trying also, this brass kind of has a lot of age and tarnish on it and texture that I did in the background. And that is, kind of putting layer upon layer and not putting just in one color, not like pasting all the colors on. All right, there's kind of I'm going to go a little bit darker here for some of this kind of tarnish stuff that's in here. Main thing that's going to make this look like brass, whether you're painting silver or copper or brass or pewter, depending on the shine level, but the main thing that's going to make it look shiny and reflective is the highlight and reflected lights. And so what that means is you have to have enough contrast between your highlight and your local color of the object. So you just want to test that highlight. I'm just using some Naples yellow. You could also do some lemon yellow and white is another route here for this painting. But you can test it and just see, like, does that really feel nice and shiny? And I'm also using a palette knife because anything that's shiny, you want that highlight to really be sitting on top and not too blended in. If you apply it wet on wet with a brush, oftentimes it'll apply it kind of too soft. Grabbing a little bit of this Azure blue and white to make sure I get a little bit of that in that highlight as well. That kind of greenish color. So you just want to be sure that you don't apply it too thin and also not too blended. You want that impasto to really pop. Okay. So, you really want to make sure you're not losing too much time in between paintings. Or, for example, if you have a goal to start entering your paintings into shows and you get maybe multiple rejections. Maybe you entered a bunch of shows at once and you got multiple rejections, or maybe just one show and you got rejected. Sometimes that can take a little bit longer than just a painting that didn't turn out well, but to recover from, depending. But, you just want to make sure that you take care of that internally. Love yourself, like show yourself so much empathy. We give so much empathy to our animals, to our children, to our partners, and so we just really want to show so much empathy and acceptance and love to ourselves in those moments. Isn't that a beautiful orange? So cad orange, a little bit of cad lemon. And I just want to start this, make sure that this edge that's lit up is really nice and crisp and colorful. I'm not using medium at this stage. This rind is a little bit older, so it's a little bit duller in color. You can go with that. You could make it a little bit duller. And I turn my brush to the side just to kind of pick up some of that burnt umber. I love painting these little rinds that have the twisty, turny things. Another good question I used to ask myself and still ask myself whenever I'm struggling is, at the end, I do kind of a flash forward, whether that's at the end of this week or at the end of my life, perhaps, if it's something more intense. Or, maybe that's what's required is the high intensity of the question. But for example, like at the end of this week, looking back, how would I have liked to have shown up? What's going to leave me feeling pride and dignity and proud of myself? How would I want to have shown up? What choice would I have loved to have made? So that's a question that, I'll often ask myself whenever I'm struggling to kind of recover or bounce back from a situation. Burnt umber and cad orange is what I'm using here for shadow color, to start the shadow color on the inside of the rind. And I'm just looking for an overall shape. Here, there's a lot of glow in there. But again, you want to start simple. Always start simple. Simple shapes, simple colors. What is the shape, the color, and the value? And then perhaps what's the saturation level? So if it's a bright saturated color, I'm so not used to working with this Chinese orange anymore. I'm forgetting it's even there. Darn. Okay, so for the shadow color on orange, I'm starting off with some black and some of that beautiful Chinese orange and a little bit of burnt sienna. Let's see. I know what I can do. I can add in some Chinese orange. Let me wipe that dark out of my brush into the color of the orange, because I know that it gets a little bit richer, kind of more red orange over here closer to shadow. And then the luminosity of that Chinese orange is just going to add, look a little less lit up than, sorry, transparency, not luminosity. It's going to look a little less lit up than the opaque cad orange. So the more opaque a color is, the more it feels like, more light is actually going to reflect back from that pigment on the canvas. And again, we want to start to create form by, building the highlight on the internal center of the form if there is a highlight. While I'm in this area, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of break the edge here. Just like if I was painting water, you had a reflected light on water, I would just kind of break the edge. For some of those reflected lights. Now, these little orange pieces here are so teeny tiny, especially on a 6x8. And so I'm going to start them kind of more lit up with the Naples yellow, some of that cad orange. Yes, a little bit of cad orange, basically the orange color that I mix with the cad orange and cad lemon, but really with a lot of that Naples yellow. I want to get that power of that light right away and make sure I'm using enough paint. You want more paint deposited in your lights, in your light shapes. You want that coverage in the light, more opaque. This is why we use more opaque colors. And then I can also just click where the membrane is. You can switch to a smaller brush. I'm using a number 2. You could definitely go down to like a 0. Hello, Manet and Robin, welcome. Happy you could join us. Wiping that white out of my brush, and if you see like, oh, there's a little more vibrant orange, you can grab a little bit of the cad orange. Since this is actually a translucent, these cut pieces of orange, you get even more, they get translucent. So that's where I could maybe grab some of that Chinese orange, mix that in with a little bit of the cadmium color, get a little bit more glow. How am I doing on time? Ooh, not great. Gonna need to kind of speed it up a bit. And then where I need to maybe push even more light, where there's more of that kind of pulp, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but that may be where I use a pure white just to really get it more lit up. Wipe that pure white out of my brush, because now I'm going to go to, this is talking to that. The orange is talking to the shadow. And you don't want a bunch of white in your shadow. So I'm just trying to get some of this reflected light started here. Maybe some of the blue of the background. Okay. And then that shadow needs to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to go in with some ivory black, some burnt sienna. Actually right here, this is just the burnt umber I started with, so it doesn't really have enough depth or darkness to it yet. Same idea, if you want the reflected light to read more powerful, maybe need a little alizarin to get it a bit richer and more luminous, translucent looking. If you want your reflected light to read richer and more luminous, more vibrant, then you want to surround it with some darker value and also duller color. Basically, it's opposites, right? When in doubt, if you need something to stand out, when in doubt, you need it to stand out, look at the opposite contrast. Okay, so this is a vibrant color for the reflected light, so I can't have too much color in the shadow. And, I have to also kind of monitor how bright I go with that reflected light. That's pretty good there. So if I want it to be even more vibrant, I've got to go the opposite. I've got to go more contrast in the value and more contrast in the saturation level. It could also be contrast in paint quality, right? So maybe it's a more specific brush stroke for reflected light, and the opposite, smoother, nondescript brush strokes for the rest of the core shadow. We've got a nice cast shadow from this handle. You really want to be on the hunt for cast shadows. They do so much to get the illusion of depth in your painting. And also, whenever you're setting up your painting, make sure you do have enough things that are overlapping in front of one another. So for example, just that handle casting a shadow, or this piece of orange rind here is casting a shadow as well onto the brass. Okay, I'm gonna drop the value of the tabletop plane. I'm using some of that burnt umber and azure blue, a little bit of white. I go orange, the orange color to stand out more, and the reflections on the tabletop to stand out more. What do you have to do? What would rhyme with the word out with contrast? To stand out. Anyways, I have to think about that one. Things that rhyme or alliteration help us remember stuff better. Start building a little bit of yellow ochre. Just going to lighten this a bit. Maybe you guys can think of something. Horizontal strokes. You can go broader in the front, narrower towards the back to get the illusion of perspective and depth. Shout. Yeah, there you go. Shout. Shout. That's good. Right. So raise the volume, right? Crank it up a notch, or I guess as Emerald would say, like bam, or turn it up a notch. Depends how much you want to build this reflected light. Again, much like painting water, you can break through the edge, just break through the bottom edge a bit. I like to do a combo of vertical and horizontal strokes. Just try to finish by going horizontal since you're on a horizontal plane. That was just kind of our color that we used for that had the Naples yellow in it. If you need to reestablish, the form a bit after you break the edge, it's, no worries. Come back in with the cad orange. And then there's a beautiful bit of that cast shadow in between this orange and that orange. I don't want to break up this piece of light too much, so I'm not going to go too dark on that cast shadow. I don't want to use like black. So I'm just using some Chinese orange because it will be darker in value. than the other values, but also it's going to have a lot of kind of glow in it. And it's not going to be too dramatic of a dark or a stop. It'll keep that light flowing. So reflected lights, keep reflected light and reflected color, keeps the light flowing and moving. So if you have a little piece of light like this, you don't want to break it up too much with too many little starts and stops of dark light, dark light, dark light. So I'm just trying to kind of tie these shapes together a bit while still, getting in that cast shadow. A little bit of burnt umber, just the tiniest little amount, just to neutralize some of the color. Just want to create a sharper edges also will look more colorful and more lit up. So sometimes you need to kind of either come back in and carve the contour sharper with the background color or the tabletop color, or, are you painting with your palette knife enough to get a crisper, sharper edge of light, especially on the edge facing the light source. And then this bottom edge down here, close to the tabletop plane, these are the edges that I like to kind of open up a bit and just kind of let that rest and settle and get grounded there on the tabletop plane. Let's see, I'm going to use a little bit of yellow. You can also use maybe some yellow ochre, but again, if you want that reflection to read a bit stronger, you want to punch it up a bit. Take it up a notch. Okay. Out of the habit of using this Chinese orange, as much as I wanted to use it, it's like my brain's not reaching for it because I haven't had it on the palette in so long. It's okay. So some Chinese orange, some burnt sienna, just to start these shapes here. Not too thick or I won't be able to paint on top of it. Okay. And I might even need to pull in some alizarin crimson because these actually have a little more red in them, like more of a red orange. So we do have quite a variety of orange in the foreground. We have kind of yellow orange, red orange. So I think that's kind of important to talk about that too. You can do a painting like this with just a couple simple colors, 2 or 3, colors, and then just look for variety within that color, variety of saturation. It is, moving from yellow orange to true orange to red orange. That will bring in enough variety and complexity for the color. Again, for the reflected light, bringing in some of that more red-orange color here. That needs to stand out, so we're going to make it shout a little bit. Thank you. Who gave me that? Was that Trish? Trish. Yes. Yeah, Trish actually, holding my brush this way. Yes. So a lot of artists and teachers will tell you to hold the brush this way at the back of the handle. That is the way why paintbrushes were designed longer, and really specifically for larger paintings as well, because it helps you to stand back from the easel. So most artists back in the day would stand and paint, and if you've seen Joaquin's photos of Joaquin Sorolla, the Spanish painter who would do like huge, like 10-foot, paintings on the beach, actually in plein air on the beach. He's a crazy sucker. And his brushes were almost as tall as he was. He's a little short Spanish dude. Anyways, so you want to hold them at the back of the brush, and you can hold it like this, which, one of the teachers I studied with was David Lafell, and he always teaches to hold it like this, but you can also hold it like this. And so if you want to really, kind of loosen up in your brushwork, this is a good thing to do as well. But most of us, the utensils we grow up using are held, like a pencil or a pen, are held like this, and we learn to write like this. So when most people start painting, it's common sense that they start holding the brush that way. That's just, so it would be curious to see, like, for in Asian culture, do they hold the brush that way because they eat with chopsticks more often, I think, and I'm curious how that affects them holding the brush. I bet they have a tendency to hold it like a chopstick, you know. Okay, so just building a little more light and opacity here on the top of this rind with a little bit of Naples yellow. I created a sharper edge first in front, and then blended the strokes into that, basic orange color. I don't know when things like that start to become more intuitively done. Over the years, sometimes it's like you just kind of discover, I think, with practice, like, oh, this is a faster route to it. And obviously, I've been in the habit of painting a lot of paintings, especially smaller paintings. And, I started teaching pretty fresh out of art school in 2011. And so I had to also kind of learn how to paint faster and get kind of more finished looks faster by doing demos, either for students or demos for galleries and events and shows. And so I'm not quite sure when things like that start to click in, but there is I think constraints make us more creative. And a lot of times people just want to take way too long on their paintings. So if you can constrain the amount of time you're taking to complete a painting, you're going to be so much more creative in your problem solving. It really is true. So this idea that to make a great painting that you have to spend forever on it, I think is just a misconception. Yeah. So how can you give yourself more constraints in your art practice is something also to think about. Do you need to give yourself constraints with the colors that you're using? Maybe you're just using way too many colors. Do you need to give yourself constraints with your subject matter? Do you need more repetition in a particular subject, in order to really understand it better? Whether that's still life or, are you jumping around too much, too often? Do you need to give yourself constraints with time? Do it faster, limit the amount of time you're spending on it. What can you do this week to build in some constraints for yourself so that you can get better faster? Sometimes people are putting way too much colors on their palette, or have too many brushes to choose from, or too many surfaces to choose from. It's like, my God, too many decisions. So find areas where you can build in constraints for yourself if you want to grow quicker. Your brain, is a master problem-solving machine whenever you have constraints. Limitations are not bad, they're actually good. It's kind of like somebody getting put on a budget, right? Can they do more with less in order to save money? They can. They're just maybe not being planning enough, or maybe they're not being thoughtful enough, or creative enough. So constraints always, make us more creative, more resourceful. Just building a little more. You can see I'm just building subtle opacity on top planes right now. That's what I was doing on the tabletop plane. Almost more important than the Chinese lanterns, really. which is why I'm tackling it now rather than later. The Chinese lanterns can always be painted out and left out. Not that I want to, but you know what I mean? So prioritizing, especially if you have limited time, you know, the background could be treated more simply, things like that. But, you know, the look, getting the look of fundamental, like the look of light, the look of form, these are non-negotiable things to make this particular painting successful. And sometimes it's just you don't maybe understand that that's more important than putting everything in. Like, oh, you know, if I can just get everything in, then the painting will work. And then maybe you've missed some of the very fundamental things like creating the illusion of form and light. Now, a few things painted well where you get form and light is more important than, you know, tons of objects, I would say. Okay. Grab a little bit more burnt umber or over on this side. Now, one thing that also can make things stand out more is quieting the background more and also working the edges around the contour that's overlapping in front of the background. So I'm bringing in some more burnt umber here to layer in. Some more of the shadow. I want to sharpen up this edge a bit more in particular here. You want enough clarity where it counts the most on the starting edge. Just kind of bring your brush in. It's going to be easier to paint this stem over top of the background, so I'm just going to paint over that stem for now. In your background in general, you want to move from darker on the top to lighter at the bottom. So kind of close down that top edge a little bit as well. Why is that? Because you have light hitting the top plane and then emanating up into the background. So very similar to painting a landscape. It doesn't mean it has to be like super bright. It's just sometimes, I guess that kind of goes counterintuitive. We might think, well, to make these lights stand out more, contrast, right? Like more like what I said about the shadows, getting a reflected light or a highlight on the brass to stand out. But in that case, if I go too dark and contrasty around these lit objects, they won't feel like they're very luminous. So, you know, you kind of have to go more for the look of light in that case, the look of luminosity and atmospheric, you know, that kind of atmospheric glow. So for example, you know, like this edge here, you know, it's great that it's in the shadow, but you can also do a little bit around the top into the background as well. So sometimes you have to make a bold stroke like that, knowing that you're gonna kind of blend it in a bit. The reflected lights create that look of, you know, translucency. No, my brain, my words aren't working as well now. Sort of that halation, I guess, is a better word. That light sort of refracting into the atmosphere or into the tabletop plane. In this case, with still life, you know, it's not really so much the atmosphere like in a landscape, but in a maybe tabletop plane or wall plane. Okay. Need to get some shadows in on the Chinese lanterns. Let's see. Let me go for it. I didn't think I was going to use that cadmium red, but I'm going to, just because I'm out of practice with the Chinese orange. But basically some black to kind of darken this. And on these Chinese orange, Chinese lanterns, they're kind of like little paper lanterns. You know, they've got nice sharp pinches in them. So you want to make sure you get enough of a sharp edge to create that illusion of a pinch. And they're kind of that paper thin, sharp edge. So I'm looking for the contrast with the cast shadows or the shadow colors first, and then where I need some of that sharp edge, try to see if I can create it with this brush. Going a little brighter, lighter. You can pull out a smaller brush as well. That would be ideal. So flowers and leaves and things like that, you want sharper edges on the outside, softer edges on the inside. So I'm looking for all of these kind of sharp contour edges that are in front or against the background. And sometimes you just can't get that edge sharp enough without coming back in with background color and sharpening it up. And again, your secret weapon of cast shadows. There's a really nice cast shadow here from the brass pot, casting a shadow onto the very top left edge of this Chinese lantern. Go for a simple shape where you can as well, I would recommend. So simplicity in the shadows, especially. Simple shapes, simple colors in the shadows, less detail. You know, your shadows should look, you know, somewhat flatter, I would say, than the light. You want to build up more dimension of paint in the lights. But if your darks don't have enough weight, you know, enough contrast, then your lights won't have enough power. I'm just going through and just looking for more of these cast shadows. Like this lantern is in front of the back lantern, so it's casting a shadow onto it. I'm also looking at the contours against that background. You know, how dark is that? How dark is that color, or how light is that color? Also against the background. And I know that my background is adjustable because I just kind of put in a simple mass of color. So I do not take the background as a given. Add a little bit of white to this. Some highlight on this back. You do have highlights on these. So look to see if you have one. You don't always have them, but on that top of that one, there's definitely a highlight there. And Rome wasn't built in a day, so, you know, it's like having some patience, one step at a time. And if you don't have the patience yet, if you haven't built up your stamina, your focus, paint something simpler. You know, maybe it's not time for you to paint Chinese lanterns, or maybe you never want to paint Chinese lanterns. That's just fine. It's fine. I think we just really have to break out of this, I have to do it this way in order to be a good artist. No, you know, most importantly, you want to make sure that you're painting. So if something is hindering you from painting, that's the first thing to correct. Just kind of twisting that paint off my edge. Like I could have never in the early days had the brush control to paint these crazy little suckers. You know, so I just didn't paint them. You never saw me painting Chinese oranges in the early days. Well, maybe I shouldn't be painting them now, but for you. But, you know, I knew that I would get there. I did know deep down I would get there. And I also had to just say, like, hey, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm not ready for roses yet. I'm not ready for my the limitations of where I was at in my development. And so that is one thing I guess I'll say was a gift. Like, as hard as I was on myself sometimes, I also did have enough understanding to know that, to be patient, and didn't mean I didn't try something, to test and see, am I there yet? Am I capable of handling that yet? But sometimes I just knew, like, I don't have the focus for that, and that's okay. But again, I think that comes back to not comparing ourselves to other artists, or not feeling like we should be further along than we are. It's like celebrating where we are, and accepting that and appreciating that too. Just popping a little bit more light on this edge because this one is angled more directly to the light source. And then this is one that would definitely benefit from using the background to carve out and around. I don't know, Lynn. Can you guys hear me? Let me see. I don't know. It's sounding good on my end. I wonder, and I probably am talking a little bit softer as I'm concentrating here at the end, but it seems normal on my end, so I wonder if it has something to do with a device that you're using, perhaps. Okay, now there's little bits of orange and red in the background, so I'm going to grab some of this orange and red, add a little bit of white to it. Now I'm going to add that kind of away from the Chinese lanterns for now, just to indicate that there's some kind of pattern going on back here. You want to keep your brush flat to the surface. Okay, and again, vertical, try to just do vertical strokes. If you do horizontal strokes or bring in another stroke, you can always use like a soft hair brush to kind of blend and flatten it out, or go back over it once you get your design in with vertical stroke. But mostly you want this to kind of blend in with the rest of the fabric. So I added more alizarin on this side because this is the darker side, but you do want to repeat, at least to some extent the fabric design, both on the shadow side and the lit side, much like you would do on a pattern vase. You don't want to just have the pattern just in the lit side. You want to make sure that you get enough of it on the shadow side as well. Pushing contrast between those plane changes there. And I'm going to go a little bit lighter in the background with that azure blue and some white. Let's see, kind of a maybe put in some alizarin. There's kind of a grayer color back there, kind of a little cooler, a little bit grayer. This is also going to be useful here to get more contrast around some of these edges, the contour of these against the background. So I'm going to carve that out, which is going to make sort of like a with the rest of the fabric. Carve, carve, blend. Carving by twisting the brush with the paint, your background color on the brush. Carve, 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 make the shape more clear, more contrast around that shape, overlapping shape. This is really important to do on lit edges and overlaps. Thinking I'm not going to do this cast shadow that was down in here It's only there because it's my backdrop, my light box is close to the object. So if that light box was pushed further back, I would not have that cast shadow. I'm thinking it's kind of better just to pull that fabric down. That means I'm not going to go quite that dark on that particular pattern color. And then last but not least, you can, if you're in a time pinch like me, you can just soften where the light is joining the shadow. Any parts like that that maybe are too harsh where the light's meeting the shadow. And then final things like your stems. Some of these stems are dark against light, so I'm going to start those darks first, do some burnt umber and alizarin crimson. And then some are light against dark. You can also use like a liner brush. If you use a palette knife, you can't really get one perfectly curved edge, so you just do the best you can with it. And you get better at that with practice too, but definitely in the beginning, I felt like, what did I feel like? What's a good analogy there? A baby trying to walk. It's like, or a baby trying to feed itself for the first time. It's just like, no coordination yet. So if you're in that boat, just know that I've been there, done that. Everybody has to go through it. You have to be uncoordinated in the beginning. And if you can't deal with that, you'll never learn to control your brush. You will never learn how to control the palette knife. You have got to be with the discomfort, that comes with just simple things like that, just having the physical dexterity to do something. So we just have to be realistic about it. You wouldn't maybe expect to be a figure skater overnight. You're probably going to be unsteady on your feet before you can do a triple axel or even skate backwards, right? For some reason, we forget that whenever we're learning to paint. We forget that this also is a very physical thing that we're doing that requires hand-eye coordination, practice. But, if you can't sit with the discomfort long enough and accept the discomfort long enough, you will not learn brush control. You won't learn how to be the master of your tools, and so just like we learned to eat, eventually learned how to put food in our mouth, although I still struggle with that sometimes. Whoopsie daisy. The same thing is true for painting. So, but that the adult ego is really something else. It just wants it all to just be easy, breezy, come together very fast. And so it's a very humbling experience, painting. So, trying to think of yourself as a little small child, and, if you fell down trying to learn how to walk or ride your bike, hopefully you didn't have somebody yelling in your face, "Oh, you stupid, you messed that up." It's like, what? No, of course they fell down. They don't know what they're doing yet. Oh man. But sometimes we're just so, we have unrealistic expectations, and we're also very, very hard on ourselves as adults sometimes. So try to, have a beginner's mind and be like a little child. If you can, it'll really help you learn faster, because also like the harder you are on yourself, harder you make it on yourself, the longer it's going to take for you to get better and learn and grow. So, okay, that was a flat, just a, silver ruby satin flat to kind of smooth out and blend some of that background together there. All right, everybody, thank you so much for being here. I will see you tomorrow for another demo. Probably roses or sunflowers. Okay, bye for now and happy painting.